Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Case Closed. This time we're doing Amnesia, Machine for Pigs, which you should probably know, unless you have amnesia yourself, because you'd be able to read it across the top of the. Anyway, I'm Bob Fish. I'm joined by Mr. Jensen, and
Hey,
I have a challenge for us this time. Since it's us, let's see if we can actually manage to finish this case closed in less time than it takes to finish the game. I mean, that's 4 hours, so we're going to be really pushing ourselves here, but I think we can do it.
all right.
Yeah. Anyway, we actually gave rather different scores to it, which took me by surprise, to be honest. So, you start. Why did you score it so relatively lowly?
Well,
Well,
I think just like I wrote in my review, my appeal, I just feel like it's not a bad game by any means. It sounds harsh to just give it a 3 out of 5, but it just feels like it doesn't do anything new to the Amnesia brand or franchise, whatever. Uh, and instead, it's sort of, uh, I mean, okay, so it as you know, if you've read the review, it strips down certain things. It takes away the inventory management, and I think that's for the better. The sanity system was cool in Amnesia, but it wasn't really used that much, so it was kind of pointless anyway. So I'm fine with that being removed as well, and having to look for tinder boxes and stuff like that. Maybe it made you a little more scared, but at the same time, it was the focus was just too much on throwing boxes around the rooms, trying to look for tinder boxes or lamp oil underneath and stuff like that. So I think when you take that away, you have a chance to immerse players more into the story and to the atmosphere of the game instead of sitting around in the inventory and looking at your sanity and stuff like that. Uh, but when they remove that stuff, I feel like they have to put something else inside there to weigh up for that. And the thing that they're doing is the focus on the story is higher. And I think that's good, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to work that well in Amnesia. Because there's no real there's no interaction with people. There's no uh anything like that in the traditional game sense where you tell a story. Instead, you're just left to read these notes and the notes kind of just it's like for me it's about games. It's show and movies too. Show, don't tell. Don't tell a
that's
story. Show the
a
story.
very well-known idiom indeed.
Yeah, and I just feel like the the notes are that sort of they tell the story and they tell something gruesome, and that's fine. It's like, ooh, what the hell is happening here, and your brain starts going. And I'm a huge fan of in horror to like, yeah, show don't tell, but at the same time don't show too much, like the monsters or whatever is in that game or movie, that makes you scared once you see it. Once the murderer comes out through the window or something like that, chasing the protagonist, then that subtle, scary atmosphere is gone, and it becomes like a action movie almost, or action game.
Yeah, we're far more afraid of what we can't see. When
Yeah,
it's right
exactly.
there in front of us, it takes away a lot of the power it has over us.
Yeah, exactly. And
I can get behind that.
but I think the notes do a great job in that sense because it's like it doesn't show you. You just have to try and imagine, and what you imagine is always much more horrifying than what they can ever show, right? So I think that's good, but at the same time, I don't feel like there's anything backing it up in the actual game apart from a few things. Oh, that's one thing actually. Before I continue, are we discussing spoilers at all? Mild spoilers? Are we spoiling everything? Are we not discussing any spoilers?
Well, my personal preference is to try and avoid them if possible,
Yeah.
but if you can't say what you're going to say without it, well, people should really be aware of the fact that there might be spoilers
Yeah.
dropped in something like this. The
I'm not going.
review
Yeah.
is
I'm not going
without,
to
but yeah,
spoil. I'm not going to spoil the ending or any like serious things, but there might be like tiny little minor spoilers that because I hint to certain events in the game without
you mean like the
explaining.
bit where there was that thing and they did the stuff and then they went around that
Yes,
corner?
that thing. Or
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
um, no, but I just so I just feel like certain um the notes, they do a good job, but they build up to something that I feel never actually is there, that never comes, never. actually happens. And that's very annoying, especially when I have to read all the notes myself, and the whole story is told basically through the notes. There's some voiceover, and it's very good voiceover. It's good acting, so I don't understand why they couldn't have a guy read the note to us to help immerse us. Instead,
Yeah, I found that a little bit odd as well because several of them during the Dark Descent were
mm,
narrated by Daniel.
yeah, exactly,
Usually
and
only Daniel's diaries,
yeah,
but from what I recall, about 60% of them were actually narrated.
and there is voiceover in this game too, so I don't understand why they couldn't just put someone to read the notes as well. So the bottom line is that it's just that I feel like there's not enough new in it, and the focus on story doesn't work as well for me. There is a great story in it, but at the same time, it's supposed to be a game. And Dear Esther is similar, but it's shorter and it's also 6 or 7 euros, whereas
It's more open-ended as well, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
true.
little snippets here and there,
Yep.
whereas Amnesia is it's a very linear and very consistent tale.
Yeah, and I also feel like well, the story in Machine for Pigs is sort of like divided almost. It's the same story, but you can interpret it the basic version, which you, if you do that, then you understand everything in the beginning. In like the very few first notes, you understand. Okay,
Yeah,
they're
I
making
actually
a
commented on that.
yeah.
There was perhaps by about halfway through, I pretty much knew everything that was happening and was going to happen, and it was in a way it was kind of jarring to hear Mundus. No, it's not Mundus, is it? No,
Yeah.
Mundus is from Devil May Cry. Yeah,
No, no, no.
Mundus.
Yeah, it's Mundus, I think maybe.
Mundus. Yeah, why do I keep... Yeah, Mundus, not
Wasn't there a guy in
Mundus.
the original
Sorry.
Amnesia called Magnus? I'm always confused by that shit. Maybe it isn't. I don't know.
Um, I don't remember now, but I was getting mixed up with Devil May Cry for a moment there. Mundus, the Great Demon. Now, if he was in there as the protagonist, that would have been quite interesting because he would have been just like, "Where are my kids? Murder everything." Then, but it's yeah. I found that by reading the notes, I pretty much knew everything that had happened and everything that was going to happen, barring some of the very fine details of the climax. And it was weird to hear the conversations between Mundus and whoever the other guy is, with him still denying it, like he had no knowledge of it. He wasn't even denying it. It was just like he had no knowledge, and it did create something of a disconnect. But it's what you were saying actually. It feels like, in a lot of ways, the narration, the voice work, is telling the story,
Yeah.
and the text logs are telling the story as well. So you have two ways of accessing it. And if you don't read them, you're still going to pick up pretty much everything as it goes along. It just won't have quite as much context. I actually quite liked that. It made things better for us, and it was what you were saying about the immersion. Something I actually commented on myself: the fact that they'd taken away the ability to interact with most of the environments. Like you couldn't just go and pick up a glass and throw it against a wall and smash it, which I know some people will argue breaks the immersion. But then again, as I said, do you often go wandering around places just randomly picking things up and throwing them at walls just to see if you can break them? No, I didn't think so. So it makes sense that you wouldn't just randomly pick up everything you see just because.
And I think it
So
was
I actually like that.
intentional. I think it was intentional
Mm.
because when you look at YouTubers who play, because Amnesia became a huge hit like by word of mouth with YouTube videos and so on, and a lot of people like certain, I'm not going to name his name, a certain Swedish guy who's just really tedious. And just a lot of other YouTubers as well when they play horror games, they're like throwing things around, yelling, and like, and in Amnesia there was the whole joke about like using the chair to hold off the monster and boxes and throwing, just sort of trying to manipulate or trying to almost not break the game, but you know what I mean.
Well, I actually had a moment where one of the creatures got stuck on the other side of the door, so I was just constantly opening and closing it in his face. And I was giggling like crazy. So I sometimes you just can't help yourself.
Yeah, of
It kind of
course.
became my thing after that. Every time I was playing through it, whenever I got one, to try and do the same thing. I only worked once though,
Uh,
but you know,
well, I just feel like Uh, they probably did it on purpose. That was the intention to remove some of that because there is no. one major thing that, for whatever reason, I didn't mention it is that the puzzles have been toned down, and some people probably hate that, but I personally think it's a good thing. And in the beginning,
It felt a lot more refined to me.
yeah,
Uh,
and it just
it's the fact that they'd trimmed down the puzzles. It was grating in some ways, but it also made a lot more sense because the game was a lot more focused on the story. Even the interactions with the pigs themselves were um, a lot less pronounced. Although they did have this thing with Lightning Pig where you had to go and flip the switches.
yeah, yeah.
That blew me away when that came because it came so completely out of nowhere. That actually really sucked me in for a moment there because it was so unexpected.
Well, and they
But
didn't
beyond that, there
overdo
wasn't
it.
really much in the.
They
Yeah,
didn't
that was the
overdo
thing.
that because I think if they had done that, then it was like what the hell, a boss battle in Amnesia? It would feel
Mm,
weird, but they didn't overdo
it
that.
was
So
very organic and natural, but
and
it
quick
did
too.
come a bit out. And yeah, that was what really sold it for me. And that fact, it's a teleporting lightning pig. That was awesome. I was gobsmacked. But yeah, um, it was nice to see less of a focus on the combat because it became somewhat tedious during the Dark Descent. It get to the point where I wasn't
What, the puzzles?
particularly no the combat. The puzzles I didn't have a problem with personally, but the combat did get a bit grating at times because there were times I'd just want to be carrying on with it, and then one of the creatures would come out of there, and I'd have to go and run and hide. Not because I was scared or anything, just because I was like, "Well, you just get out of the way. I need to get past you." And if you tried to go past them, they just stab you in the face and murder you to death.
Well, they toned that down, and I am not sure I know how I feel about that. I it's the stealth mechanics worked quite well in Amnesia, I feel, but at the same time, the level design of A Machine for Pigs wouldn't lend itself to
It
the
is a
stealth
much more
approach.
linear game. I've noticed.
Yeah,
It
and
felt you were apart from that right at the near the beginning when you were in the mansion. Pretty much everything after that was a straight line.
yeah, and even in the mansion, most of the doors were locked anyway. So, and you could see that they were locked. They had like these huge metal blockades on them. So
Which
you,
was never quite explained.
nah, I know, but well, I think that's, part of what is cool about it, is that not everything is explained. But I just feel, and the ending too. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I feel like it just happened, and then there was no sort of like, wow. I just felt like, well, now it's over, and that's like I felt every second of it. I was 1 second ahead, basically. Like I knew what was going to happen, and it wasn't sort of like there was no plot twist, and it was an obvious plot twist or anything. It was just an end, and then it was over, and then I'm like, okay, now it's done. And I was just a little bit uh, puzzled by that.
I think maybe in a lot of ways the storytelling was just too too intelligent. It did its job too well. So if you were paying attention with anything more than a cursory glance, you'd pick it up straight away instead of being subtle and making you feel, give yourself the feeling of patting yourself on the back for figuring it out. You're just like, well, yeah, okay, you already told me that. What's the big deal?
Yeah, like I said, there's sort of two ways to interpret the story. Where you have the basic one where you understand everything from the beginning, pretty much, and there's the higher one where it's they talk about the Aztecs and sacrificing hearts and souls and his children, and that whole thing. There's a lot to be picked up in it. It is a pretty good story if you try to interpret it that way, but at the same time, it's just there's not enough in it interactive gameplay wise. It doesn't warrant a 17 euro game when the gameplay isn't new. It's the same as Amnesia the old, except there's less of it. And some of the things that they removed is for the better. Some is like not for the worse, but it's just, yeah, okay, it works both with and without it, but there's nothing added in that like, oh, I'm so glad they put this to like take one step forward with the franchise. It just feels like sort of the Chinese room's take on Amnesia, basically. And honestly, I feel it's a little too pricey to just be another experimental Dear Esther type game.
I could see your point. And then again, if it was going to be a Dear Esther game, it would be a lot more open ended. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that. In a lot of ways, I think the linearity certainly helped them tell a much more concise story. It didn't wander as much as The Dark Descent did,
Yeah, and
but
I
it
didn't
can
wonder
feel
as
restricted.
much as I did in the Dark Descent, because in the Dark Descent, because of the puzzles, and the puzzles weren't just intricate, but they forced you to walk to different rooms and different corridors, and like, oh, you have to, okay, here's this thing, you have to solve this, but first you have to find like four things to put here, and they are all in completely different places in the castle. Uh, and then you get them, and then finally you get to do the puzzle. And by that time, you spend hours just walking around trying to find out where this thing is, and sometimes being scared by the sound design and by the monsters coming at
Like
you.
the elevator, that was a good example of that. 'Cause you had to find the key to the machine room. You had to find the rods. You had to activate the steam pipes,
Yeah, and when you put the
then turn
acid
on the
thing
power.
on that gooey thing to get through that hallway, some of the puzzles just didn't add anything to the experience. They just bogged it down. And for YouTubers, it was probably fun, but for me, I just wanted to like immerse myself in this. I didn't care about the puzzles. They didn't make me feel intelligent. Didn't make me feel like I was challenged. It's just it was like the way Borderlands do how they do quests in Borderlands, where it's like you have to do this thing, and it's like, oh no, you did the thing and you did it correct, but it's apparently not correct, so you have to walk to another side of the entire world and do that same thing again. And then when you do that, you have to do it a third time, and then finally it's done. And it's like, why are you doing this to me?
It's the modern day equivalent of backtracking for
Yes.
extended length, isn't it?
Yeah. So I just feel like the puzzles didn't add anything really, and I'm personally kind of glad they're gone. But I just feel like, or one thing before I go on the negative side, um, I loved in the beginning where it was like you could very easily get stuck if you didn't read the notes, because in the notes they were relatively subtle, but not, you have to be pretty stupid to not understand it. Where it's like, oh, how did you get from that room to the bathroom so quickly? And it's like, maybe there is a secret entrance in the bathroom. And then you walk around and you try to look around. Oh, the picture can be opened, and there's a lever behind it. And I like that. That was my kind of puzzle solving, where it's like, let me look through my notes. Oh, here's something. Okay. Well, maybe it has something to do with this, and then you explore a little and you find the solution. Instead of like, here is something you need to do, but first find five things in completely different places, then come
It was
back
more
and do it.
about observational skills than lateral thinking.
Yeah. But that was kind of only in the beginning, and then it sort of disappeared after that. And again, it's not such a bad thing because it's the story that's the focus, but I just feel like the story wasn't interactive enough. And one time when actually you did see the story in the notes play out in the game, where I'm gonna try not to spoil this, but you probably know when you go into the surface and certain things happen, right?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, that's one place where, things happen. And I feel like it was anticlimactic because, and again, I'm spoiling a little bit, but not too much, I think, where you don't feel like you're in any sort of uh, danger. You don't feel like the heart is pumping and blood is rushing. You don't feel that sort of adrenaline as I thought I would, or I should rather. Like
Well,
when a
at the
monster
same
chases
time,
you, when a
you
monster ch
weren't really supposed to at that section. You think about it, it was more of everything was going to hell around us, and we were like the island of calm in the middle of it. That felt like that's what a lot more what they were
I
going for at
suppose
the
so, but
time.
it just felt like a Call of Duty segment where it's like there's a whole war going on around you, and you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, look at all
A
that
set
crazy
piece.
stuff, yeah. And then you just, when you think about it, the gameplay of you is just this soldier walking around, not doing anything. You're just looking at things, and it's like looking at a movie, and that's what I just feel this whole game is too much like. It's too much like watching a movie or reading a story or being partially told the story. And again, I think I would be more satisfied or less dissatisfied with that if the notes were narrated, because fine, you want the story to be more important, fine, you want us to read the notes, but please help us a little along the way, like because stopping up the game and having me read a whole page of this stuff is like after a while, if you get too many notes at the same time, it's like I'm gonna skip this note and move on. And then once you start doing that, then you kind of ruin the experience.
I can see your point. But for me, I quite liked getting everything through a little bit of spoon-fed text. I like that kind of thing. So it's what you like and what you don't really. I see. I do get what you're saying with it. It did feel a lot like a movie. Like I keep saying, it is a very linear story. I just personally didn't have a problem with it because I thought it was a very refined, very focused story. So it was almost like an interactive movie with some minor branching off. I just think that they pulled it off a lot better than you do, which, it's personal taste, isn't it? Some people will like that, some people won't. What you were saying about them removing things, though, it did remind me a lot of what they did with Penumbra
There
way
was
back when.
combat in the very first Penumbra, and it was kind of weird, but I actually mastered it, and I killed every damn enemy in that game. It felt so
I
good.
used dynamite.
Oh yeah, I just used a
I
pickaxe.
did
I
it the
just
easy way.
slashed the dogs and the
Well,
people, monsters,
the
everything. I
very
just
first
killed it all.
time I used dynamite, eventually I managed to get all of the dogs to chase me,
Yeah.
and I jumped up on a box and just whacked them all with the pickaxe as well. So yeah, removing the combat from Penumbra, I thought was a very good choice because the idea was brilliant. The implementation was clunky.
Yeah,
But
and it
then
was just
remember they had an inventory, then they removed the inventory, then in the third one they even removed the monsters as well, and it became purely puzzle solving. It does feel like in some ways, whether intentionally or otherwise, they're kind of emulating that with what happened with going from the Dark Descent to Machine for Pigs,
yeah. Well, that
which
was fictional games
maybe I
all the
liked it
way, and
because of
now
that.
it's yeah, maybe, but I just think this is the Chinese room's sort of take on it. You know, fictional games helped, and I think the way it worked is they finished the game up for the Chinese room and released it. But the Chinese room, you know, when you play Dear Esther, you can clearly see the similarities in how it's a story that they want to tell you, and you're supposed to sort of walk through it and just gradually get these pieces of the story, and then you're supposed to take it into your brain and you're supposed to develop it and interpret it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I feel like when you set the price so high and it's in the Amnesia name, I feel like both there should be something new to it, and I think the uh, um, how to say it, the yeah, I think there should be new gameplay and also uh, the stuff that's new or you know the story it should have more emphasis put on the technical side of it like I said with voiceover and now I'm repeating myself a
Speaking of
lot.
which, actually, Dear Esther, one of the advantages that had is that although it's little bits and pieces of drip fed to you, everything in that is narrated, which does make it easier to absorb. So some people it can really break it up to sit and read. I was going to say something else then as well, but it's completely gone out of my mind. Oh yes, the length of it. What did you actually make of the length? Do you think it was too short? Just right?
uh Again, I mean, for an interactive story as it sort of is, it's not, it doesn't feel really short. I guess maybe some Amnesia the Dark Descent fans will find it jarringly short, and again compared to the price it might be short, but I didn't feel like it was too short. I just felt like it was the length was good and it felt longer than it was, and
Yeah, I
that's
felt that.
yeah, and that's you know because it is a horror game and you don't really enjoy your stay, you know, or you're not supposed to enjoy your stay anyway in the game. So you know you have to play it in certain bursts and then stop, have a break, and just oh, I don't live in that world where pigmen roam around, you know, just like, and then you come into it again. And probably that's why it feels longer because it's not the game that you sit down and you play 6 hours straight. You play 10 minutes or 20 minutes straight or 30 minutes straight, unless
Actually,
you're,
I did the entire thing in one sitting.
well, then you're a psychotic or a hard ass. I don't know. But no, but I just feel like, you
Well,
know,
I was fueled by tea. I paused twice to make a cup of tea, but other than that, I sat. I went straight through. I just got hooked into it personally. It was probably because of all of the notes that I was finding. I found them interesting,
Yeah.
compelling,
And
so
I
I
mean, you
got
gave it a
caught up in
five,
that.
so that, it does make sense though. But I just feel like it's in the beginning, it's very just creepy, and the atmosphere is, well, creepy, and it is throughout. I mean, the sound design is amazing as always. The squeals of the pigmen is just horrible, in a good way, or a good way, design wise. But I just feel like the game was less scary, and it's Amnesia. It has a the what is Amnesia known for? It's known for making people shit their pants. The whole word of mouth started with like it's the scariest game ever, and there's always these people who are like, nah, it's not that scary, but the general consensus is that it's very scary, and when you then have a Amnesia title coming out that is more cerebral and less in your face, then it might be a little jarring for people, and I think a lot of people are disappointed for that reason.
I suppose that's the thing. I don't really go into horror games expecting to be scared. I go into horror games expecting to laugh at why everybody else was scared, and I can understand why Amnesia is a very tense, very taut, and very psychological game. But I just don't get scared by stuff like that. So so I suppose because Machine for Pigs was so much more focused on the narrative, it just appealed to me more because it wasn't constantly trying to scare me with stuff that would make me laugh.
I
Like I
suppose,
said,
yeah.
with the when the creature was stuck on the other side of the door in the Dark Descent, and I kept opening and closing it. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. Everybody else would be like, "Oh no, get away from me!" And I was like, this is amazing." And then every time I saw one, I'd run after them and I'd be like, "Stop going away! I want you to kill me." I did the same thing with the pigs because I'm crazy like that. Also because I wanted to see what they looked like. I wanted to see how they moved, and I got my curious head on. And then speaking of the pigs, actually, towards the latter half of the middle, if
Hmm.
that makes any sense, when you actually get down into the underground and you start seeing them, that was heartbreaking. Seeing what they'd done to them
Yeah,
in the cells.
it gives you sort of yeah, sympathy for them, and it's not something you often do, because the monster in a game is usually like you have to kill it or you have to escape, and that's what it is basically.
They
And
humanized the pigs, which was quite an accomplishment.
well, yeah, they characterized them. They
Mm.
made them feel like
They weren't just creatures; they were characters
yeah.
in the setting, which I thought was really good. I'm still not sure what the hell was going on with the pigs, but I don't think we're supposed to quite get that. It's
I
just
think that they were set to. Well, I'm not gonna spoil things, but if you interpret it higher, then it's
oh
like
no, I got within the narrative. It's just I don't quite understand
they're set. They were the ones
why
who were
did
to
he choose
operate the machine, I
pigs?
think. Well, I don't know. Why pigs? Well, I think it's
Because he was a butcher, maybe.
maybe
It did
because
show he was a bit nuts
pigs have supposedly very similar biology to humans. Like you can
and high intellect.
not just that, but like when you hear about implants and they use a pig. A part of a pig to replace an organ in a human or something. I don't know if they actually do that, but
Oh
scientists
yeah,
are
they do.
supposed.
They're real world pigs now that have been bred to. There's something about they have. I think they have a 3% divergence in the DNA, and one of the aspects is they have this little film around the organs which makes them poisonous, makes the human body reject them, and they bred some pigs that they don't have that anymore, so that they can actually now use them for transplants. It's quite scary when you think about it. They literally injected human DNA into real world pigs, and I'm like the third or fourth generation now, which is maybe that's where they came up with the idea. Maybe somebody was just reading that and thought, this would make a fantastic idea for a horror
Well,
game.
also because Pigman is just
It
the
sounds badass,
yeah,
doesn't it?
the association to pigs. I mean, when you're a pig, you're disgusting, right? You're grotesque. And a pig
And you're
man
big
is
and
like,
tough.
whoa, what the hell is this thing? It's the size of a man, but it has a pig head. It's disgusting, you know.
Mm, and
So
intimidating.
yeah, it might be part of that too. Just, but yeah, I think it might have something to do with the sort of the fact that since they do splice together a human and a pig and making pig men, it might have something to do with the real life biology.
And
similarities.
then it did get very, very bizarre with the whole pigs eating pigs within pigs that were pigs and fed to pigs that were being pigs. And that kind of baffled me for a while. And I still haven't quite managed to figure out how many layers of pigs eating pigs were actually involved in that. All I know is there were a lot of pigs.
Yeah, and they had didn't they have the f less fortunate? They fed the less fortunate, like less fortunate,
Well, they made the
hobos or
less
whatever.
fortunate fat by feeding them
Yeah,
pigs, and then they
and then they
captured
killed
them
them,
and
and they
killed
fed
them
those
and
to
fed
the
them
pigs.
to the pigs, and
Yeah.
then they fed those pigs to the aristocracy, who were then murdered and then fed back to the pigs. Like I say, it was like this recursive loop of pigs, which was mind-boggling.
And it was cool. Again, because
And
it's like
it
this
was
all.
so far-fetched, yet
Yeah, and it
it
evokes
fit at the same
certain.
time.
Yeah, and it just makes you think, and I like that, but at the same time, it's just my main issue. The reason why I gave it three and is I'm reviewing it for the readers, right? And I just feel like though I didn't hate the experience or anything, I just feel like as an Amnesia game, it will likely and has already disappointed a lot of people.
Which is fair enough. And a
Uh,
3 out of 5 is still an above-average score.
Yeah, of course, and it is
You
not
know.
mediocre. I mean, it does use the same engine. It has better variety and it looks prettier than the last
Mm.
game. Uh, because the last game was like cobblestone walls and that was it, right? It was
Mm.
high texture cobblestone walls, but it was still cobblestone walls, the whole game. And now, you get to walk a little more on the surface and so yeah, but I just feel like there's not enough new in it. I want to when I play a game and I say, okay, this is so and so good, and then the sequel comes out or another game in that franchise comes out, and it's uh, only basically the same, just with changes that are neither in total, in summary, neither better or worse. And
Call of Duty.
I just feel like
Call of Duty.
no, I just feel
Sorry,
like
I
yeah,
cut you off.
it's not as it's not what I had hoped it would be. I thought it would be bigger and better than it ended up being,
Which is
gameplay
fine.
wise especially.
I think the long and the short of it is that we both agree that it's a very good game. It's just there are certain things that drag it down for you more than for me. In fact, some of the things that pull it down for you are what push it up for me. So we've got to have a variety of opinion there.
That's
So
why we have
let's
the
see.
appeals.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody listening, either you're an arty ponce like me and you'll love it, or
Shooter
you're
horror or
a
something.
little more critical like Mr. Jensen, and we'll still love it, but we'll just have those niggling annoyances.
Yeah, I just feel like if you do like Dare Esther and you want more of that type of game, and it's not, I don't mean it in a bad way at all. It's just if you're that type of person who just you don't care about the gameplay, you don't, or I care about gameplay,
Want
but
the
sometimes,
experience?
yeah, but sometimes you just want something different. And if you just want that, if you don't need the gameplay to be the focus of absolutely every game, then sure, go ahead and buy it. But if you liked Amnesia, the original, you liked the puzzles, you liked the water monster chase and so on, then you will very likely be at least a little bit disappointed. Uh, and I just feel at the price it sold, had it been 12 euros or 10 euros or something like that, then easily buy it, anyone, everyone. But at 16, 17 euros, it's just a little too much, I feel, to recommend to everyone.
So your advice is to wait for it to go on sale then.
Yeah, at least do that. And even then, again, if you're an Amnesia veteran, you might be disappointed by the actual game, no matter what the price is. So,
That's reasonable. And I think that's case closed. So everybody, thank you for listening.